Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got my good buddy on. You know him, you love him. Firefighter, Mr. Tony Peterson. What's going on, dude?
I got a new job, buddy, since the last time we talked.
I know, man. You're fighting fires for the elderly and whatnot. You know what I mean? It's like you got a whole new thing going on. It's a whole new approach to access.
Literally, probably the craziest way that I've ever gotten permission to hunt somewhere is by putting out a shed fire for an old lady who was burning garbage a little too close to some buildings. But
Nice.
I'll take it. I mean, mostly the cool thing about it is it borders a property that I own over there in Wisconsin, and I don't go out of my way to talk to people in those situations. You know, like I've owned that land since 2015. I've never met the neighbors other than the one who stopped by to talk to me. I just kind of like leaving people alone, and like, you know, if we hit a deer and it ran in there, I would have definitely made contact and whatever, but we've never had that. But leaving there and seeing that shed on fire, I had my daughters with me because we were baiting bears, and it was kind of an ordeal, honestly. Like, it was a lot. I got into a lot more than I thought I was gonna when I saw her shed on fire. But you know, as soon as everything kind of got put out and the insulation inside stopped burning and all that stuff, I just started talking to her about deer. And, you know, she was pretty open, and I had my 12-year-old daughters with, which doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt,
and, as soon as we got back in the truck after she gave us permission to hunt her place, my one daughter goes, "Dad, I knew you were going to ask her if we could hunt her deer." Like, well,
oh, man.
I mean, how often does an opportunity like that come along?
Yeah, exactly, man. I could just see you out there with the garden hose, you know, fighting the fire, you know.
Dude, it was a very serendipitous timing situation, because if we'd have been 10 minutes later, that whole thing would have burned down. And she has a chicken coop with a bunch of chickens right next to it. So to see that fire hop there, it would have been, it could have been really bad. And it was an old shed with a bunch of random stuff in it and whatever.
So she didn't lose anything too awfully valuable, hopefully, at least.
I don't think if you added up everything that was in that shed,
right?
I don't know if you could go to McDonald's if you sold it all.
Right.
You know, she's been there a long time, but I mean, you know how it is. Like, you know, she stores her chicken feed in there and whatever. But it was just an odd scenario, you know. And it's funny because I've got these trail camera photos of these bucks that obviously go from mine to hers and vice versa, and she's watched the deer in the hayfield behind her house a lot. And so when I talk about a deer, she's like, "Oh, that's the one with 13 points, and he's got this really heavy antlers." Or she'll be like, "That was the one that had the limp and had the weird side." And I'm like, "How often do you see these deer?" And she's like, "I see them all the time."
Oh, man.
You know, and it's weird because you don't think, like, you're like, you know, these deer, especially there's that big one over there that we've been getting a few pictures of. I look at that deer and I'm like, that deer never shows his face in daylight. You know, he's an old buck in kind of north central Wisconsin. He's been hunted hard. And she's like, "Yeah, I see him back there sometimes playing with the other bucks and eating in my hay." And you're just like,
right.
It's like there's so much of the whitetails world that we don't get to see. And then we kind of just like fill in the blanks, and we always err on the side of like, they don't ever do this, and they're super cautious, and like right on down the line. And then you talk to some lady who lives next to you, and she's like, "No, he's He walks right through my yard sometimes, and you're like,
he's eating out of my bird feeder. He lays down right here all the time, you know.
My dog scares him off, and he runs back there, and he eats, the apple trees and the apple, and you're like, oh, this is all kind of, like, not all in my head, but like a lot of it is,
Right. Yeah. It's funny because we were just talking about that before we started recording about how little we know, and not, little that we know, but like we fill in all the blanks that we don't have confirmation for. And that confirmation is usually always, either an observation while you're in the stand or while you're in a tree, or what we know from trail camera, information. Maybe a little bit about what we know for scouting, but scouting is a lot of just hypothesizing, right? Like you think this deer made this sign, or because this sign is here, he may or may not have, he may have been there, and then the funny thing is like when we're talking about it, when we were talking before we started recording, you're like, and then maybe they just want to lay down here because they just want to lay down, or they want to just eat something here, and then that's it. Like it doesn't go any further than that. And we have this like grand, like a deer has a grand plan to evade us. Like they're thinking about us like we think about them, as kind of how we think about hunting them, right? Which it couldn't be further from the truth. They're just kind of going about their day.
I don't think they think about us as much as we think about them.
Oh, 100% not.
And I was thinking about this. I've got he's like a decent 8-pointer. He's really nice for over there, but he's like, if you saw him in a lot of places, you'd be like, he's just like an okay buck. Like not bad, not a giant. But that deer, I got a series of trail camera photos of him. I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks ago, and he came in embedded in front of my camera, and then he went to sleep twice. And both times he put his head down, and then 9 minutes later he picked his head up, and I got another picture of him. So the 2 times he took a little snooze in front of my camera, he slept for 9 minutes and woke up. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, I've only ever seen one deer sleep, and that was a mule deer that I ended up killing just because I had to sit on him for a long time. But I was like, we don't think about that part of their life at all. Like that big buck is out there sleeping somewhere day and night at certain points. And we're like, oh, they bet in the day, they run around all night. And it's like, man, we have no clue what they're really doing. I
mean, if my dog is any indication, he sleeps a lot. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That dude will like pull up a piece of carpet and just fall asleep, like, an hour here, move, go eat something, get some water, go lay down, chew on a bone, sleep for another 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And like, if you think about it, I'm not saying dogs are exactly like deer, but I mean, I would say there's some similarities there in kind of how they behave to a degree. And to your point, it's like, I've only ever seen one deer sleep, and it was just a couple years ago. It was a spot that I'd been hunting. It was actually where I killed my Pennsylvania buck last year. And it's kind of one of the things that helped me learn or figure out the area. This buck came in. I think I might have even told you about this, but he came in. It was a good buck, and went into this like bed. I never expected them to actually bed there, and he bedded behind this log. And I didn't really even see him come in. I just happened to see through like a hole in the brush. You know how you get like a hole in a brush, and you're like, and then you spend like the next 3 hours trying to look through that hole in the brush to see if anything's back there, Right. And I was doing exactly that, and I saw something that looked like an antler, and I was like, man, that really looks like an antler. And I was like, it's just a stick. And I was like, I should probably glass it and see. So I throw the binos on it, and I'm like, man, that really does look like an antler. I was like, that's like the most antler-like stick I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? Because I still thought it was a stick. And then the deer picked his head up, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, there's a buck, and then he ended up bedding there for like 2 hours, and I just kept watching. He would nod off like 5 minutes, and then he'd pick his head up, look around a little bit, and he would nod off again for 5 more minutes, and this went on, and then he would get up and turn, and this went on for like 2 hours, and that's literally the only deer I ever saw, like, actually fall asleep, and and they don't nap long, man, so it's kind of wild,
right? But I mean, you think about how much time you spend in the woods, and you don't ever see that. Like,
yeah,
I've never seen that off a tree stand. I mean, I've seen deer come in bed, and maybe they did nap a little, and I just didn't pick up on it, but it's like, that's so rare. And it, what's weird about it too, I feel like if I have a real hole in my whitetail game, it's the bedding part of it. Like that's always been a struggle for me. But then, like I'll watch them, and I'll have a buck come in and bed down, and then, an hour later he gets up and he just beelines it somewhere else. And you're like, well, what's going on here?
Well, that's what he did. Like he literally, because there was a scrape that I was hunting that wasn't far away from that. And I was like, as I'm watching him and I'm glassing him, like I realized what deer it was. Like I knew, not that I knew him, but like I had him on camera, and he was one of the ones that I kind of marked where it's like, if I see this deer, I will kill him, you know? And because I wasn't hunting a specific deer, it was just like there were 3 in that general area that I knew were good, like mature bucks for the area. And so I'm like, sure as shit, he's going to get up. And when he does, he's going to want to scent check that scrape. He may not go to it. I was like, but he's going to have to come past me to try to scent check it. Right. Well, moral of the story was the wind switched, and my wind was still good, but now the scrape was kind of like blowing toward him. And then 2 hours go by. He stands up and just like gets up, walks north. No clue where he was going. There was nothing north that was like of interest, like at least in my mind, you know.
Yep.
And he just got up and walked away, you know. And then I realized at that point that like the wind had switched and he was able to scent check it, and that's why he wasn't going to come to the scrape. So I knew I was kind of done at that point, unless he wanted to mark it. That was the only reason he would come that way. Yeah, and then he just got up and walked away, like wasn't in a hurry. He just got up, moseyed around, browsed a little bit, and was like, all right, I'm going to go this way. And I'm like, the only thing I knew of in the area that would have drew his attention was that scrape. You know, I was like, I don't know why he didn't, like, why did he just go to the opposite direction? Like,
yeah, well, because there's so much more randomness to it than, like, I kind of don't think nature does like a lot of random, but I do think that we think they're way more predictable and like way more structured in their schedule than they really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think we think that largely because we see them go to the same food sources a lot.
Right. Well, we have a few destination places that we base all of our data on. You know what I mean? It's, you know, if you get a deer coming back to a bedding area, and that's why guys who are good at hunting beds, like, and I'm not one of them, you know, a lot of those dudes are pretty consistent, right? Because they're really good at finding that. And it's like, well, he's got to come back to here at some point. Right. And as long as I keep my wind clean, my access good, it's like I can hunt, you know, whether it's a specific deer or a handful of bucks someone might be chasing if they're using like an area to bed or whatever. Yeah. Like they're usually pretty consistent, right? Because it's that and the food, but then the food changes throughout the year, right? And so it's like, are you rotating to the right thing? And like, is that the thing that deer has a preference for? And when I say preference, it's not like we prefer, you know, pizza over French fries or whatever. It might be proximity to where they like to bed or where they feel secure or whatever the case is. It's like there's a bunch of different reasons why they could prefer it, you know? And so everything in between we make up based on the 2 places we know they want to be.
Well, and dude, I honestly think there is a little bit of pizza versus French fries thing going on, at least in the early season. When there's so much. I mean, you know, when you think about it, if you spend a lot of time glassing food sources, especially in the summer, they come out that bean field and they feed for a while and then they go back into the woods for a while. You're like, why? Like they're just browsing on something else. I mean, they have like so many options. And I think, you know, they're probably pretty in tune, even though they probably can't consciously figure it out like, oh, I want to eat this today because my body needs more of this or whatever. They're just drawn to it, kind of like thirst or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think I think we find comfort in dumbing this shit down for ourselves and being like, they bed on that hill and they feed in these beans and they walk in between. But I think it's because I think you'd go mad if you were like, I really want to understand what they're doing, because they don't probably understand what they're doing.
Right. Know? Yeah. Well, then, I mean, just, you know, I know we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording too, but like you were talking about just like how dynamic that time of year can be, that early season, right? It's like, it's not just food, but there's like the whole like whitetail world changes at that time of year. You know what I mean? Between food changing, their bodies are changing, right? They're going through like a physiological change at the same time. There's people coming in, right? Like there's so much that's happening in the woods that you have to kind of plan for, and things you're not going to be able to plan for and just adapt on the fly, right?
Well, right. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, you know, because I probably have more deer on the wall from September than November. Like I put in a lot of time hunting September, but I also, you know, like you think, okay, well, I glassed those bucks or I got on some kind of pattern that they're coming in late July, August, whatever, you walk in and hang a stand. It's like, well, the thermals or the wind or the conditions in late July and August are just likely to be different than mid-September. So, you go out and like maybe you catch them on the same trail. Like maybe they're that consistent, or maybe one of those little variables changes and they just come in the corner instead of where you're at. And for me, I've killed a fair amount of them in September, but I've had so many times where I've been like, this is just going to happen. And then I go in and it just does not happen. Like, I mean, that's like, that's like mostly how it goes,
right?
And it's as simple. It could be those conditions. It could be the first tree dropping acorns, like it could be one apple tree. But I think most of the time what happens is it's a combination of a bunch of little stuff. And then it's just the extra presence of people out there, like I think this was probably 2019, had a whole bunch of good deer on this farm in southern Minnesota. I had this stupid easy stand on an alfalfa field where I was like, you're going to see deer on it. I know some of them, depending on the wind, will come out on this trail because they kind of get hemmed in by this big drop-off ravine. And so it's like it's got a little bit of a terrain that helps you out, but there's a lot of places they could come out there. And I went out opening night, killed a great big 8-pointer, just like came in like they're supposed to. And I was like, man, I'm going to run this pattern next year, fill my tag right away again, give myself more time. And I had the following season, I had a whole bunch of bucks coming out there. Same setup. I was like, God, I'm gonna pull a repeat, and that never happens, Right. And I got a picture of one guy going in to hang cameras in there a couple days before the season, and the entire program died. Yeah. Just, there were still deer coming out. Those big deer were like, nope, this is over. And it might have been solely his presence. It might have been something else, but that happens so often. And I think we look at early season and we're like, well, it's super predictable, right? Go sit the destination food source. Maybe you have an October 1 opener and you're like, go sit the acorns. I'm like, well, which ones? Like which tree? Like which ridge are you on? And so in our heads, again, we're kind of like, oh, this is an easy time of year to hunt, but it's there's so much changing. And you and I talked about this before the podcast. Like, I actually think that the appeal of the rut is because it just dumbs this stuff down, and you can go volume hunt a terrain trap and at least be in the game. But when you're not in the game in the early season, like you tend to be way off, and you tend to do a lot of damage right away.
Yeah, and early season is one of those things. Like when you're in the game, dude, it is like it feels great. Yep. Because it's like you feel like there's a little secret that that nobody else knows or something. You know what I mean? And if you don't, like, you're 100% right, where you couldn't be further from being correct.
Yep.
Most of the time, I think part of it too is that people spend, all off season kind of, and not saying it's a bad thing, but they spend all off season kind of daydreaming about this scenario, right? Especially if there's like a buck that they're chasing, or if there's like a group of bucks that they know of that's like, oh man, these deer are feeding in this bean field, or they're coming along the edge of the swamp, or whatever it is, right? That they found some consistency, and they're like, man, it's going to happen in this spot, right? And then when it doesn't, it's like, womp womp. It's like you feel like that whole like several months of planning and everything just like got shit on. Yep. And now you're back to the drawing board and like, well, now where do I go? Because I would have had like this pegged as like a slam dunk that it was going to happen in this place at this time, or whatever the case is.
Yep.
And typically, man, the deer just have a different idea, than you do.
Dude, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like when you look at that, let's say you've got an opening weekend plan, right? Like you're like, they're coming in here. I got my stand set up. If they don't do this, I'll go to the secondary point on the field or whatever, and I'll get them. And instead of just reacting to what the deer show us, like if they don't show up, right? Like we just dig in our heels and go, now I'm gonna ride this out harder, because if they didn't do it last night, they're gonna do it tonight. Right. And we start to burn out our spots. And the advantage that the early season deer give you is like when you find sign early season, it's so good. You don't have the concentrations you're dealing with later in the season. So they show you something early, you listen. Like they're telling you the truth, but oftentimes instead of just, all right, meeting the deer where they're at, like doing what we have to get to them, we just go like, I'm going to ride out this program till we burn it out. And then it's like, okay, well, now we're getting toward the lull or whatever. I'm going to back way off and be smart. And I'm going to wait till October. And it's like, to me, that's, for a lot of people, that's the exact wrong thing to do. Like, you got to go find them. You have more leaves up. You have like generally a quieter woods to move around in. I mean, it's going to be pretty thick, but you can go figure something out.
Yeah.
And you're not, so many times when that happens, like you're still not that far off of them. Like if they decide they're not coming out in daylight, they're probably going to be on their feet 100, 150 yards away from you. They're just not going to poke out there. So it's like a little shift sometimes, but we just want it to happen where we want it to happen,
Yeah, that point of that sign being very indicative that time of year is really key, right? Because you hit that mid-October to first week of November, just call it, right, where most of the signs being laid down, right? Like it'll start a little bit earlier in some places, right? You'll get some, like scrapes that'll open up beforehand or whatever. But like when you really talk about that prime time for that stuff kind of kicking off in the woods, it's that second-ish week of October to like the first week of November. And then after that, like the sign you're finding may or may not, either before that or after that, maybe the sign isn't as telling, but that early season sign, that is such like a good piece of evidence, especially if you think a deer, or a group of bucks or whatever the case is, are being consistent in some way, shape, or form, right? Where it's maybe they did get off the program you thought they were on, but I think a lot of times we think they've blown out of the county where they probably just shifted 100, 200 yards or whatever the case is. And if you didn't blow them out of their bedroom, they're probably still using the same general areas they want to bed in. They're probably just shifting how they're kind of moving around within that area, right? And so that piece of sign or that fresh rub or whatever it is, or a fresh track or whatever, man, that's gold, because they're there now, and there's not a lot of deer laying stuff down. You know what I mean? So if you're finding it, it's at that point, it's like you can kind of whittle it down to a handful of deer that are probably doing it. If those deer are in the area, and like maybe there's a dispersion happened, right? Or like their fall shift happened, and it's like, oh, these bucks are still here. Well, now with pretty good confidence that it's probably one of the ones you've been watching, or the one of the ones you know of.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think, to your point, when you start getting into like mid-October specifically, you get a lot of like false positive signs.
Yes.
And I think about this. I missed a buck one time in northern Minnesota, and it was like October 15th through the 20th, somewhere in that time frame. And I had two bucks coming through the woods, and they were just kind of meandering through. And the bigger of the two made like several scrapes on the way in. And I was like watching him, and I had this just thought in my head. I'm like, he's never going back to a single one of those scrapes. Like you could see him, he was just making a scrape to make one. It didn't mean anything. And then I've got a spot over in Wisconsin. I like to hunt this chunk of public big woods. And twice I've watched big deer make rubs in there where I was like, that doesn't mean anything to them. Like they just did that to do that because it was like the moment, but it wasn't like, I just remember thinking like, I don't think you could use that like in any real valuable way other than just like you're in proximity to a place bucks might be. But when you start out in the beginning of the season and you start finding that sign, I mean, like even though, like the bachelor groups of the summer, they'll split up, they go hard antlered, and there's some things that'll happen where they stop being friends anymore. And we all talk about that. Yeah. But a lot of times you see bucks hang together way later into the season than you're supposed to. And sometimes it's big deer. Like sometimes it's, like a really good one and then a nice one, or sometimes it's like a trio or whatever. And when you have those deer kind of like going from bachelor groups to whatever they're going to be for the next couple of weeks, a lot of times they hang together a little bit. Might not be 6 bucks altogether. Right. But they lay down some sign. If you find that rub or you find one of the first scrapes of the season, there's a really good chance that there might be multiple bucks using that spot right now. And that's not going to be the case in a couple weeks.
Right. Yeah. The other thing is getting adept at discerning that sign that you just kind of mentioned, right? there's, you'll walk through the woods and you'll see a rub and you get all fired up, or you'll see a scrape and you get all fired up, and then we've all been there, right? But I think when you get to the place where you look at it and then you actively try to discern, does this mean anything or not, right? Because I remember I was talking, I think it was Hal Blood at one point I was talking to about it, and we were just talking about scrapes, and we maybe talked about rubs too, but I know we definitely were talking about scrapes and stuff, and he was basically talking about, there's, especially as a tracker, like you have to be really in tune with like what you're looking at, right? And what he was basically saying is like when you come up on certain sign or whatever the case is, you see a scrape. He's like, is that a frustration scrape? Is that a scrape that's territorial? Is that right? It could mean a bunch of different things, and you have to kind of discern, like, is there value associated with it that is actually usable? Or did this buck, to your point, just walk through and be like, I feel like making a scrape and I'll make 6 of them in a row and then I'll never come back to any of them, Or I make a rub because it's a frustration rub, and maybe it's that younger buck that's with that older buck and he knows his pecking order and he can't take it out on the older buck. So I'm going to rake a tree, right? Because I'm fired up. I got a little testosterone juice flowing. I feel like fighting something, but I'm pretty sure it shouldn't be that guy, And it's kind of being able to kind of do that stuff on the fly so you don't get kind of caught up. And it's like my litmus test is always, is this in relationship to anything that I think? It's because I won't ever say that I know, because I don't think I ever really know. Is this in relationship to anything that I think is in this area that a mature buck would want to spend time around for some reason, right? Whether it's, there's an oak flat that's 60 yards over this way that I know about, right? Or there is a bedding area that I know that they like to transition to when they go through their shift, their bedding transitions over to here. And I know it's only like 100 yards over this way, right? Or whatever it is, I try to relate it back to something that I know. And if I can't do that, then I'm like, this is probably not anything worth spending any time around.
Right. I mean, there's a lot going on there, but one of the things you said too about like the little buck with the big buck and taking out his frustration, man, I'm starting to get to the point where, I mean, like, I love big rubs, like everybody does. I just like rubs. And those two bucks I mentioned in Wisconsin, one was probably like a 125 8-pointer, really nice buck over there. Mm-hmm. And the rub, I went up to the rub. I actually killed a different buck right next to it late, like 2 weeks later. But I wanted to look at that specifically because he was 150 yards away or whatever when he made it. And I was like, God, it's just a little tiny sapling along the trail. And then the other one that I saw was like a 160. It was a giant deer. And I ended up killing a different buck that night. So the next day I was like, I'm just going to go in there and look around and see, why did he come down the hill the way he did? They both came down the same spot, but he didn't come in. He made that rub and looped around this bench on this hillside, and it was a little tiny rub. And I got to thinking about it, because you're like, if you go to like a swamp and you're, like, let's say you're winter scouting and you've got a swamp and you find all that brush and shit on the edge of it, if it's scraped up, rubbed up, you don't immediately go, that was a little deer. But if it's a single sapling, you
automatically assume it was a small deer.
Right. Yeah. But it's not. It's like a mental thing. And so I'm like, I'm trying to assign more value to every one of them than I might be inclined to, because I really don't know who made them. And we think we do. And, I mean, obviously, like, I think you're pretty safe in saying like a really big rub probably wasn't made by a Forky, right?
Right.
But I think that, like you said, like sometimes they just go through there and they're like, I'm just going to rake this tree and I'm going to rake that one or what, or I spend enough time here that I have to find something to do. Right. And so it's like, stuff like that's just so cool to me, because you have this idea in your head and then you watch them do something where you're like, that's not what you're supposed to do. And then 4 years later, you see a way bigger deer do the same thing and you go, okay, like, again, I don't really know what's going on out there. Because what I think, like this soft rule I kind of have in my head, I've just seen 2 big public land bucks do this thing that breaks that rule. And it's like, okay, if I can witness that, how many times does that happen when I'm not here to see it? All the time,
right?
It just reframe. Like it's very hard for us to reframe how we think about some of this stuff, but they do a good job of teaching us to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed this a lot just in the big woods in general, is that I don't find a lot of big rubs, just in general. Most of the ones that I find are typically small. And once in a while I'll come across like a good one. I would say in the big woods piece that I've been hunting in Pennsylvania, I maybe have come across 2, maybe 3 rubs that, like, by my standard would be like a big rub,
right.
And a couple of my buddies, like, I took some pictures and like sent them to one of my buddies, and he was like, "Oh, that's a good rub." And I was like, "All right." Like, I would never thought that it was a good rub. It was like an okay rub. It was like, oh, it's a good piece of intel. Like, it seemed like it was probably a decent buck, just based on the height or whatever, But I've found way more smaller rubs on small trees in areas where I know good deer live than I have ever found big rubs in those areas. Yeah. And, I don't want to give them more credit than they're probably due in terms of the smart, right? Because they just do the things that they're programmed to do, right? It has little to do with intelligence or whatever the case is, because in your mind, you're almost like, are they purposefully not leaving a calling card because they're staying hidden and they don't have a need to announce that they're there? Is it because there's a limited number of mature deer in the area, and he's like one of the few mature deer in the area, and they just don't overlap very often, so they don't battle for territory necessarily? Like, I have no clue why, right? You have all these things you could hypothesize why, but I don't think anybody knows, right? I mean, plenty of people would be willing to tell you that they know and maybe write a book on it or something like that, but right. Or have a seminar about it or something. But it's like, at the end of the day, they probably don't know,
I don't know. I mean, I think in that case, I think part of it is just deer density, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just not very many big ones there because there's not very many deer typically in the big woods. Yeah. But I also think a lot of times when we get that big signpost rub that you might find in, if you found it in Iowa, you'd be like, oh, a booner came in and did this. But that might be 5 different bucks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that might be the rub version of a community scrape, kind of like out in Kansas. If you find the right fence post, it might be like totally worn down because it's the only place for bucks to rub for generations. Yep. And I think when you get into the big woods, it's just like there aren't that many deer to do that. It's just a different scenario. And I mean, like you said, I don't really know, because who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that when you get into a higher deer density situation, I think that there's just like a way higher likelihood that they're gonna all visit one tree, or like right. one signpost rub, or at least a certain percentage of them will, and leave their mark there in a way that, like, they're just not crossing paths like that in the big woods with each other,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd be curious too to know whether or not they actually visit scrapes all that often either, for a similar reason. Right. Or maybe they visit more often because there's just less interaction or less crossing paths, so they have to, because there's no other way for them to engage, if you will.
I don't know. I have never had real good luck on big woods scrapes, but and part of it's probably because I just don't find as many community scrapes in those situations, and I'm not going to hunt one that I'm not like, this one's going,
Right. Yeah.
It would actually be pretty interesting to run some cameras on them for a few years and just see, because
yeah.
like on paper, you'd think you're right. You'd be like, well, if there aren't very many deer here, and this is a place that deer go to, like, take a census,
communicate, right?
Yeah, like, you'd think that would be the place, because it's just that much harder to run across other deer. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't, like, in my experience, it just doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've run cameras on some big woods, like community scrapes, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily scientific. It's probably more anecdotal than anything. But what I have seen is that you still get sparse engagement with it, on whenever they're kind of traveling through, if they live close by or whatever the case is. And they're just like any other, like, big kind of hub scrape, there'll be a flurry of activity that happens around very kind of specific dates. Like, it might be used all year round. And a big deer, if you're just saying, like, just a deer that you're following or whatever, that deer might come hit it a handful of times, once or twice in early part of October. He might hit it again late October, and then there'll be a flurry of activity where it's like him and a bunch of other bucks are hitting it within like a 3 or 4 day window, and that's about it. You know what I mean? I've not seen anything more than that. And the big flurry of activity is mainly on a select few of the scrapes that I've had cameras on. It's not all of them that I would even consider community scrapes. It's very few ones that are kind of primo. And there was usually multiple things that they had going on. It was a thermal hub situation as well as adjacent to doe bedding and adjacent to or within some type of food source. Like the one I'm thinking of off the top of my head was in an oak flat, and so had all those three things happening, and there was deer bedding in the scrapes. It was mayhem for a couple of days. And that's probably the only one I can really think of where it was that was that active, like within that window.
It almost never is that active.
No. It was bananas. It's like if you would have just been there for like within that 3-day window, you would have seen stuff that you'd never seen before, right. But shoot, man. So how you feeling about the season? When are you kicking off? I know you're doing some stuff with bears right now and stuff, but when's your whitetail stuff get kicked off?
So September 14th is Minnesota and Wisconsin, but I won't hunt Wisconsin. I'll take my girls over, let them hunt. I'm going to hunt Minnesota a little bit. I've got a place here by my house. It's a little place, but there are two really big deer in there. It's very, very spotty. Like it's 25 acres and there's houses around and stuff. So they swing through. I don't know. I don't have any kind of pattern where I'm like, well, I'm like, this could happen. I'm literally going to go out and hunt does mostly, try to get one for the freezer and help the guy who owns the land. I've got a couple of little bucks that are like going to be in trouble if he can shoot straight. I don't think he can because I took him fishing last week and I talked to him about how much he's been shooting, but maybe
right. If
he can shoot, there's going to be some little 6-pointers that are in real trouble, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But I'm kind of like, I have a weird year coming up, man. I have a big October, and I drew Iowa, and I'm kind of stoked for that. But I'm kind of pinning my hopes on some rut stuff in Wisconsin, like some mid-November, and I'm not going as hard early season right now as I usually am. And, part of it is I'm a little distracted with the bear thing. And, my daughters are at the point now where I think I can put them in different blinds and one of them can hunt by themselves and I'll take the other one. And so it's like my calculus for the early season has changed, where like now instead of me just taking one of my daughters and hunting with her for a weekend and then taking the other one, now I'm like, okay, I can take both of them. So I need twice as many spots, but they have to be in close proximity. They have to be functional for certain kinds of winds. And it's like it's a little bit of a math problem.
You have like 2 times the access kind of challenges, right? Because I got to get the one daughter to the first setup, and then I got to get me and the other daughter to the next setup without blowing up the first setup and without blowing up the one that we're going to.
Yeah, it's like a low grade stressful deal. But it's fun, I mean, it'll be. I'm really excited for that part of my season. Like they're going to have a good season, and if they don't, we'll figure out a way to try to get something during the rut or whenever we can. And so it's kind of weird, I mean, I have some hunts I'm really excited about, Iowa, North Dakota, and a few of those things. But it's like
you always go to North Dakota, right? That's usually like a pretty solid plan for you most years, right?
I like North Dakota. Last year I hunted on the east side of the state. This year I'm hunting on the west side of the state, and I haven't been out there probably in about 3 or 4 years. And I mean, we had bad EHD out there. The last time I was out there, it was tough, like really tough. I could barely find a buck. I ended up shooting a doe just because I was covered in does, and the one buck that I had in play on public, he busted me the first night, and I was like, well, that's all I have, and he just smelled me and ran away. So I'm curious to see how it goes. I'm going in mid-October, so it'll be a little bit, it'd be kind of weird timing, but I think I'll probably have them to myself to work.
Right.
But I like North Dakota, man. I like the people. I like the variety of cover you can get out there, and the hunting used to be really good. It's not the same as it used to be, but it's still, I mean, they got a lot of pressure because they have a early September opener, or
Yeah,
whatever.
I'm seeing pictures right now rolling in from,
Right.
I think, North Dakota, where dudes are killing some really nice velvet bucks.
Yeah, it's one of the few states where you can go hunt velvet deer and have a real good shot at one, and it's just a cool state, man. And for me, it's so close. I can be to where I was hunting last year. I can be there in like 4.5 hours. I mean,
that's
where
great.
I'm going this year is a lot farther, but I just like it out there.
Yeah,
And
I've never been. It's one of the places I would like to get to, I think. I think I would like to do it for an early season hunt sometime.
Man, I've done a lot of opener hunts there and killed some velvet bucks out there, and I've had a lot of success in North Dakota, but the amount of people who come in now for a velvet buck is wild. I mean, it's just it depends where you're at in the state, but you also have like mule deer and antelope and elk hunters to contend with, depending on where you're at. And so it can be the first week can be so fun, but it can also be very frustrating.
Right.
And so that's part of the reason I started going in the middle of October. It's like nobody wants to go, So even though it's not like prime time to hunt, you can still get on a food pattern, a river crossing pattern. You might kill one on water depending on the conditions, but I don't have to contend with a lot of people. And that's not the case at other points of the season,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you got to be pretty stoked for the Iowa trip, though, man. It's always a good time.
I'm excited for Iowa.
Yeah, when are you planning to go for that?
I think I'm going to start this year on the 27th of October. So I'm gonna kind of I have a week on the schedule. I'm gonna go down there and film it, and I'm gonna try to get in. There'll be a lot of people out by then, and first week of November is pretty busy. But I kind of figure if I go do that and I don't kill one, I can go back mid to late November before their gun season opens and have a chance. But it's just so. A lot of people, you hear this all the time. Where they'll be like, I would never pay that money to go kill a deer that I could kill at home. And I get it, right? Like if you have good hunting at home, but for me, I can go down there and camp and hunt public land, and I can see more deer on any given day than I'll see on private land anywhere I hunt. And I can go work the deer, and there's hunters there, but there's just so many deer to work with, and it's like such forgiving country that it's just fun. Like it's just a fun hunt where if I go down there and I shoot a 140, like I could kill a 140 at home, right? Like I could, or in Wisconsin or whatever, but I won't have the same experience. Like I won't, when I go down there, I'm going to put out that Dave Smith doe decoy in some of those spots. If the conditions work right, I'll probably have more excitement and action doing that on public land there than I could find in any of my private land situations.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's just like fun to go into.
Yeah, that's the one thing like that people kind of discount, I think, when you start talking about, going to different states to hunt, especially those prime states like in Iowa, for example, where the tag is pricey, not going to lie, right? And it takes a couple years to get it, right? So there's a little bit of planning and stuff like that. But what you get to see, aside from the caliber of deer that you may be able to kill, right? And just what you were saying, it's like, maybe you shoot 140-inch deer. Could you shoot that in Minnesota or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or wherever? Yeah, you could certainly do that, right? Maybe a little harder, but you could make that happen. But the type of activity you get to see and engage in is not like anything I've seen anywhere else. The only trip I've made out there, I'm holding enough points now to get a tag, and I didn't try to draw this year because Chad and I are going to Missouri, so I didn't put in. And I kind of told myself the next time I go to Iowa, I'm actually going to take the trailer and I'm going to just move there at the beginning of October or end of September, and I'm going to live in my trailer and work, since I work from home. And I'm going to basically stay and hunt until I kill something or the season's over. Because I was like, I just want to spend an entire hunting season in Iowa chasing deer where they act like deer, and that they respond to things and they do things that you don't see in a lot of other places. The 2 weeks I spent out there, the first trip I made, it was like getting a master's class. I've said this before. It was like getting a master's class in deer behavior, of mature deer behavior, right? Because you're going to see a number of mature deer that you, in one season or in 2 weeks, from my experience, that it would take me 5 years, if not more, to see that number of mature deer in Pennsylvania do mature deer things.
Right.
You know, and there's just like, and that to me is worth the price of admission in itself is that.
Well, dude, totally. And I mean, this is like, I'm absolutely to blame for this, just like a lot of people in the industry, but we've pushed this notion that the reason to go there is just to kill a big one, or the reason to go to Kansas is just to kill a big one, or Illinois. And the reason not to go hunt, public land in Oklahoma is because you won't kill a big one, Right. And I'm like, man, the setting is huge.
Yes.
Like Western North Dakota, where I'm going, that's my favorite place to hunt. Even when the hunting sucks, which in the last few years is, or the last few times I've been out there, has not been great. Like it used to be unbelievable, but I just like being there. And there's enough deer to work, and when you, like you said, when you get down in Iowa, there's something to be said about going into public land in a morning hunt in the beginning of October and seeing 6 bucks.
Yeah.
Like you said, like mature, like several mature deer. I mean, I've had hunts down there. The last time I drew, the first day I hunted, I saw 26 deer, and I'm like, and 7 of them were bucks. The smallest was 100 inches. The biggest was 170. And you're like, I can't do that anywhere else, and it's not, I'm not paying to hunt private land down there. I'm going and hunting public land where other people are, I'm watching these deer walk by other dudes' trail cameras and stuff. And it's like, you can't, when you look at it at like the overall, how fun it is to sit there, know you're going to see a bunch of deer, like you said, watch big bucks do big buck things. Like
that's the coolest thing, dude.
Yeah, a $700 tag now is like, okay, well, I mean, to get that in most places, you would have to pay an outfitter to put you on something, so you wouldn't have the experience of going and finding them yourself and figuring it out. And I camp down there, so like overall, my hunt down there doesn't cost me really anything different than most of the states I go to. Maybe the difference of a couple $100, but the hunting is worth 50 times what it is in a lot of other states.
I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's just, once you do it, you're like, this is just so worth it.
Yeah. I mean, I think where people go wrong is the first thing you said, which is when they start to plan their hunts, they think about what caliber of deer can I kill, right? And that's part of the calculus, right? Like you have to take that into consideration. But for me anymore, it becomes more about like what type of terrain do I want to experience? Like what type of theater do I want to have? That's more so where my mind is at. And that's why I've just kind of totally fallen in love with Plain States, because I love that theater. Like I love that open space. I love being able to see, if I could find that in any others, like if I could find that in Pennsylvania, I would hunt the crap out of that type of area. You know what I mean? Like, even if it wasn't like a huge area, but like there's a couple places I've kind of driven by that have a lot of open space like that I've kind of been investigating, because I'm like, oh man, I could probably do some spot and stock in this area, not to the same magnitude I could in the plains, but it gives me that little taste, right. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for is that, it's not necessarily, is there a giant in there or is there a good deer in there? It's like, I'll make do with whatever's in there if I can do it the way I want to do it.
Dude, when you're used to claustrophobic big woods type stuff, and then you go hunt open terrain, it's hard to beat, man.
Yeah, like, it makes it hard to go back sometimes.
Right? I mean, it's just harder. I mean,
it is.
I think the visibility aspect and the density aspect are just, they make it so much harder. And then when you get to a situation where you have some open country and you can see them, I mean, that Western North Dakota stuff that I hunt, that's one of the primary reasons I love it so much, is like, even if they are in a place where I'm going to have a hell of a time getting to them and setting them up, they're probably at least going to show themselves. Right. And it's like when you're sitting there and you can glass up some decent deer, even if they really aren't in play a whole lot, it's a difference maker from being like, well, I'm going to walk into this, 1 million acres of national forest timber here, and I got to figure this out. There's just a different vibe to it. It's so much more fun to just be where they're visible.
Yeah. I've always said it kind of this way, where in those states where it's open, I almost feel like I feel like I'm always like one turn down a gravel road away from being in the game.
Yep.
Like every time I get to a stop sign, I got to make a turn. It's like I feel like, man, around this turn I could see 3 deer out in this CRP field, or out in this cut bean field, or out in this Milo field, or whatever it is, and I can watch them and see if they're huntable and make a game plan. And so you never feel like you're not hunting, where I feel like a lot of times, in big wood settings and stuff like that. And I love the big woods because I love the challenge of it. It's just, I like it for different reasons, and I like it at different times. Yep. That one is more, the big woods piece for me is more the challenge, right, in a different way, where it's like, I often don't see them. Right. And I maybe know they're around somewhere. Right. And I'm kind of doing this on blind faith a little bit. Right. Where the other part is literally a chess match where we all put the pieces out. It's like we'd see the board. The board is visible, right?
Right.
In big woods is like playing chess, but not being able to see the board.
Right. It's just the challenge is the reason. I mean, it's the big woods are cool, man. Like it's cool to be in big timber, but the challenge is like when you see one coming, it's just different. Like it hits hard. You're like, this is why. And I mean, it's one of those things too. Like when we talk about this, so many people kind of just want like that really great spot to hunt. That's like very consistent. Whatever. I want to lease this property or whatever. But I'm seeing this a lot with a lot of my buddies have really good spots now, and they don't hunt very hard because they don't have to. And these are people who spent a long time doing the public land thing and doing the mobile thing and knocking on doors and just like really in the thick of it. But once they get that reliable spot where it's like, well, if I go here during the rut and I put in my 5 days or 7 days, like a good enough one's going to come by. You think it wouldn't happen to you, and it happens to everybody. But I think the antidote to that, and I'm not saying like don't do that or whatever, but I'm saying like it's a be careful what you wish for situation, because when you get it, you will find a reason to not hunt or scout as much because you just don't have to. But like the antidote to that is just new environments, Yes. And I've talked about this a whole bunch on podcasts, but like one of my current obsessions, part of the reason I'm not trying super hard to fill my buck tag in Minnesota right away is because if I don't, then I can go muzzleloader hunt that stuff in western Minnesota that's all cattail sloughs that I hunted last year. And I kind of really want to do that, like more than just about anything else. And so I'm like, I'm just wrestling with myself where I'm like, if I put in the time early season, like I usually get a chance, or like I often get a chance, and I almost am like intentionally sort of sandbagging. If I get onto a big one or something, I'll get after it. But I'm like, the worst case scenario for me is I still get to go hunt this new environment I'm obsessed with and have a great time, and I have it to look forward to. So I'm just like, I look at this and I know everybody wants to do that Iowa thing or the Kansas thing or whatever. A lot of people are like, I can't afford to go out of state to hunt. Shit's expensive right now. Like I get it. Yeah. But I think about this where I live, which sucks because I live in the suburbs of the cities. I can go kind of, straight south, a little bit east, and I can be in like true deciduous forest, Iowa type country kind of, like good soil, lots of deer. Or I can go 2 hours west and be in cattails and like open country, very small woodlots, different scenario. Or I can head straight north and be into the big woods. And I haven't left my state. I'm still on my, $31 tag or whatever it is, but I could have 3 vastly different hunts for almost no extra money, especially if you're willing to camp. And I look at that and I go, the thing that keeps the fire burning for me now is just that. Like, it's like, oh, you're going to just go somewhere new or somewhere that's like just caught your attention for whatever reason. And it might just be a phase with this Western Minnesota stuff. Like I might get it out of my system in a couple of years, but right now it's just a good challenge and a different thing to figure out. And so I always want to tell people like, not everybody can go buy an Iowa tag. Like, I get that. And you don't have to have a badass hunt. But if you're like kind of spinning your wheels a little bit or something, there's a lot of in-state stuff that you can do where, I don't care what state you're in. There's probably some pretty big diversity. And, a lot of it is being scared to go hunt public land because they have this bias about, home state and how hard it is to hunt. I'm like, dude, go. Just go. You'll see that what you believe about it isn't true, and it might just like stoke that fire in a way that would be like if you traveled out of state, but you don't have the buy-in for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many places I have marked on a map just around me that I've not. I mean, everything that's within about 45 minutes of me, I've scouted all of it. And I've spent some time on it. And there's one piece in particular that I've always told myself that I would make it back to because it's kind of cool. I scouted it for like a day, and I was like, and I looked at it on the map for a little while, and I was like, and I had killed a deer close to there. I don't know, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. I killed a buck over there, and it was, but it was on the opposite side. And this place is kind of big, and I was kind of like, man, I want to get back to this area. Went back, scouted, super cool, really diverse, some open kind of real brushy stuff. And I have yet to make it back. And there's like a big slough that's there where there's a bunch of dead trees. Like, it just sets up so cool. And I have yet to make it back there. But that's one of the spots, like you were saying, that I have marked where I'm just, every year I tell myself I'm going to make it back there to like shed hunt it, to check it out again and plan to hunt it. And I just never do. But it's on that list of places where I need that, when I need that fix, and I need to see something different. And it's not that far from my house. It might be like, this one might be like an hour from my house, or an hour and 15 or something like that. But so it's close enough to where you can get to it and hunt it and feel like you can learn it. But far enough away and different enough to where it feels like you're having a little bit of an experience.
Right. I mean, that's the fun part. Like, I think we sort of sell this notion that you take a spot like that, you go scout the shit out of it, then you go hunt it and kill one, you move on, or what, or you add it to the rotation. But having those areas where you're just like in the back of your mind, like someday I'm going back there and I'm going to give it 3-4 days or whatever, and I'm going to start figuring it out. That stuff's so valuable to keeping you, keeping the motivation up, keeping the momentum up too. And it's like, it's a hard thing to describe it. Like when you're talking about that. So last year when I did this muzzleloader hunt, I went into the first spot I wanted to try because I know there's going to be deer in there from pheasant hunting and whatever, but I had like A, B, C, D. I had places, bunch of places where I jump bucks where I was like, I think I can get in there and do this right and get it, be around them. And I never left that place because I was on deer and I had a good thing going. I didn't kill one, but I was like, I'm having too much fun. I'm just like figuring out their movement. And so later, I went back down there to pheasant hunt, went into my B and C spots to pheasant hunt, and I jumped bucks out of both of them. And I was like, oh, okay. So like at some point, and next year or this year, if I do it, I'll probably go back to that place I started on because I just want to, because I've been thinking about it for, well, by that time, it'll be like 11 months or 10 months or whatever. Right. But those other spots are just there, like kind of hanging in the air. And you're like, okay, are you going to figure out when to get in there? And if I don't, like, whatever, I'll do it in 2 years or 3. But having that stuff just like there where you're like, I think part of it is it just feels a little like freedom, like not like, okay, well, I'm going to the place I always hunt and I don't have confidence because I never see deer this time of October or whatever. You're like, there's just like a new opportunity there that's just like a little bit freeing. Like I have that. I can pull that lever anytime I want. And yeah, like most of the time probably doesn't work out, but you're not going to regret going and doing it. Like you go hunt that spot at some point or you devote some more time scouting it, you're not going to regret it. Like you might not kill a deer there, you might not ever hunt it, but just having it as a possibility is pretty valuable.
Yeah. Well, not just that. I think when you have a spot that maybe well, and even if you have deer in a spot and that you're afraid you're going to mess it up, right? I think there's value in going to an area that you don't know all that well and hunting it because you don't know if you're going to mess it up or not.
Right.
That's the freeing part. You know what I mean? Like
Huge.
Maybe you scouted it in the winter. Like I do that a fair amount. And that's actually how and I've talked about this before. This isn't new math that I'm introducing here. During the time, during the part of the season where I'm maybe not hitting my prime spots, or maybe it is prime time, but I don't get the right weather that I want, I'll use that time to go to places that I know I don't know all that well, or maybe I don't really know at all. Maybe I walked through it once during the off season, during the postseason, and like saw a couple rubs. Maybe I saw a scrape. I marked them. It was like, maybe I'll make it back here one day. Well, that's that one day. It's the day that the weather sucks. The wind isn't right for anything else you want to do, or you don't want to booger up a spot. And so it's like, you know what? I'm going to go burn a day here. And I don't know how many times I've done that to where I literally show up in the morning. I have no pressure, so I don't worry about getting there and getting into the timber at 4 a.m. I walk in with a little bit of daylight so I can see, because I really don't know where I'm at. I walk around, I do some scouting. I mean, I've had times where I've walked till like 3 o'clock and finally was just like, I'm going to get into a tree for the last 2 hours. And I just walked all day, and then got into a tree the last 2 hours and saw a couple deer, saw some stuff, and was like, all right, put that in the memory bank. All right, marked my track along the way, marked some sign. I just got a little bit more intel. And had a great time and felt good about it, because I was sharpening my skills without doing harm to places that I already kind of know and I know I want to hunt in the future or whatever. Yeah. And it gave me a little bit of break mentally to not have to be so keyed in on not making mistakes in the places that I hold like as a prime spot.
Well, dude, that's so important. I mean, we kind of laser focus on what we have to do to kill big ones, and it's like to the detriment of us killing big ones. Like you're talking about, if you go somewhere and you have 4 days to hunt or a long weekend, you're not going to be super safe about what you do, because you just don't have the time. And if it's a place you're just like walking into to hunt for 3 days or 4 days, you don't care. Like you don't really want to go scorched earth, but like at the same time, you're going to try stuff you definitely wouldn't try on some other properties, and that matters so much. It's the same thing. Like, there are times of the season where I go out and I'm like, I'm just hunting does right now. Like I probably don't have a chance to see a deer that's got antlers, like, but whatever. Like I want to hunt, and you go into like what maybe it's not your best spot, but you go somewhere and you try it, and man, so many times, especially like the beginning of October, which is when I really like to focus on some does if I can, I run into bucks and I see things where I'm like, man, what I thought was going on here is way better than it actually is. Man,
that happens so often, where you just find a way better spot by not going scorched earth, to your point, but just taking a walk, man, seeing what's out there.
Right.
We get so locked into these little areas and we view the woods through like this myopic lens of the time we spent postseason and stuff like that, and it's just, and we really only see a small part of it, and we really only understand a small part of it.
Right.
And the best time to know what the hell deer are doing is when the deer are doing it.
Right. Well, and on top of that, you want to talk about like sharpening your skills. So it just, I'll give you an example. So last year when I went down to Oklahoma and I hunted with Steve, we had 4 days to hunt public land in October. Like not ideal in every capacity. And he was flying in, and there's like a level of pressure to putting Steve Vernell on deer that sucks. Like it's just, I don't know how else to put it without sounding like a prick, but it's like you feel it, right?
Right.
But when we go do something like that, you're like, well, I have to have a plan for every morning and every evening, right? I just do, and that means the middle of the day is scouting, because I'm just not going to have enough to work off of to be confident enough to put him in a stand and myself in a stand for every one of those 8 sits. There's like a huge value there. So it's like that's like a different set of pressure, but where the value comes in is like, instead of being like, I'm on my home property and I know I probably won't kill a big buck this time, so I'm definitely not going to do what I would need to put myself in the game. Because it's like, it's just not worth it. You just, the risk reward, you go, no way, I'm going to wait for Halloween or whatever.
Right.
Well, you're also not drawing on deer and shooting them. You're also not like doing a lot of the parts of a hunt that make you better. And so I look at that and go, on that hunt, we shot 4 bucks in 4 days. And I shot 2 little guys. I shot a spike and a forky. Because I was like, I would have shot some does, but none of them came by that didn't have fawns that were about 8 pounds, and I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Right.
So I'm like, we're shooting whatever we can. But I think about that and I go, man, I showed up there, got 2 days of scouting in, sat. I didn't sit every sit because I killed some deer, so I was putting him places, whatever. But I got probably 6 sits out of that. Some in a saddle, some out of a tree stand. I shot 2 deer and got to blood trail one who went way farther than he should. Got to watch one other one tip over. The whole experience is of getting them out and butchering them and doing the whole thing. Like I don't have very many like months a lot of times, or at least a couple week, blocks of time where I have 2 bucks walk in and I shoot them and take care of them. You know what I mean? And so I always look at this and I go, we kind of take it for granted when we talk about, well, go hunt a doe or something. But like what you're getting there is way beyond just being in the woods and maybe figuring something out that might help you kill a buck or putting a deer in your freezer. Like you're getting real world whitetail hunting experience, often start to finish, and you think about that and go, if I walk into one of my secondary spots and it's October 3rd and it's hot, I'm like, I'm not going to see a 150, right? Like, or whatever your caliber is that would get you real excited. But you're like, I want to hunt. I want to go. I'll shoot a doe if she walks by. You're going to hunt so differently than you would. And you might sit on the ground here because you're like, well, what do I have to lose? Or like, there's a lot of sign here on this pond, but there's no trees to get into. So how do I figure it out? Because it looks like a bunch of does are coming in here. Man, you go do those reps and all of a sudden everything in your life gets better because you're like stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit and you're working through these problems that you're definitely going to face on big bucks, but you're just facing them on different deer now in different environments. The value of that shit is like, it's so high. And I know it probably, like, I know I sound like a little preachy or whatever, but I just believe that the more you put yourself in those positions, the better you just level up at all this stuff.
Yeah, 100%, dude. I mean, it's repetition, builds the tool set that you need, no matter what it is, no matter if it's hunting deer, no matter if it's riding a bike or whatever. The only way you get good at it is by doing it, and as frequently as you can, and from soup to nuts, right? It's like if you're only ever shooting your bow in your backyard, you get really good at shooting your bow in your backyard, but you may not be great at shooting at live animals, right? And if you never track deer after you shoot them, when you make a bad hit on a buck that you're trying to kill, then you don't have the skills that you need to really understand, do I let him sit for an hour? Is it an overnight thing? You have to have some of those lived experiences as like a painful teacher in order to actually get to the place you want to get to.
Well, and dude, when you talk about like when you killed that big bastard in Kansas and you were telling me the story and you'd been texting me about that a little bit, I think people look at that and they're like, they obviously can't understand what went into that. Mm-hmm. Like start to finish, from drawing the tag to the e-scouting to right on down the line to finding him to going in and actually killing him and recovering him. Right? Yeah. Like there's, I don't know, countless lessons in there. Mm-hmm. But most of the time you're not going to have a booner give you those lessons. Right. Like if you wait for the caliber of buck that you're happy to put on Instagram, you're going to get very few of those lessons. And like you said, on that hunt with Steve, the first buck that he shot at is a little spike and he gut shot it. And the blood trail was horrendous. We put in a lot of time. It was a very long day, very long night, and a very long next morning, and we never found him. And it sucks. But at the same time, that deer did stuff on that blood trail that I will use for the rest of my life. Yeah. And I think it sort of, I don't really want to speak for him, but I got this impression that if you were to sit across the table from him and be like, hey, do you think you'd screw up a shot on a spike? He'd be like, no, because why would I? Right. Why, if you like, we sit here with our egos and we're like, why? There's no way a doe would rattle me, or there's no way that I'd pull my shot on a forky or whatever. Go put yourself in those positions sometimes, because you'll learn about yourself. Like, you not only will you learn about the deer and what they do when you hit them through the guts, or you try to murp them and they run 6 feet and you miss them, and like, but you'll also just like learn about yourself and go like, man, I probably do need to shoot more. You know, because like I've been counting on being really good. Like you said, I stand in the backyard. I can do it all day. And it's like, okay, well, you go hunt that public land somewhere else, or you go out of state, and that 2.5-year-old walks in that you wouldn't even pick your bow up on at home, and now you got that $400 non-resident tag, and he's coming, and it's the last day, and you lose your shit and you screw it up. It's like you learned something really valuable about yourself there, and that's all that does is just change how you look at everything else from here on out, and that's valuable, you know.
Yeah, man, I think that's the perfect place to leave folks with their kind of things to think about as they're going into the season. You know, not taking this early season part for granted, not taking the shot opportunities, you know, the does, and just having a hunt that you're going to enjoy and learn and experience as we're kind of getting into the season. I think that's the perfect way to kind of cut it. And I also, on the topic of scorched earth, it's my daughter's birthday, and I owe her a birthday dinner tonight. So that's, yeah. So I was getting like a little side eye through the door, a little peek in, like, "Hey, we going to dinner or what, Dad?" So yeah, that's where we're at. But before you get out of here, let folks know what you got going, because I know this time of year, man, you guys have a lot of stuff at Meat Eater that you're putting out as far as content goes.
Oh, lots of stuff. You know, still putting out the Foundations podcast on the Wired to Hunt Network. I'm actually doing a podcast about dogs called the Houndations podcast.
Nice.
On Cal's feed. So it's Cal of the Wild's feed now, but that drops every other week on a Wednesday. You know, tons of writing. We got a bunch of videos. You know, our hunts last year are starting to show up now, but it's all at themeateater.com. It's all there. So
Sweet. Awesome, brother. Well, I look forward to staying in touch with you during the season. I'm sure we'll be chopping it up, shooting texts back and forth, and I look forward to seeing some a text with some bears and some grip and grins with your girls.
I hope so, buddy. Thanks, man.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible: Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.